Have you ever wondered why certain people irritate you so much? Why some behaviors make your blood boil while others barely affect you? Why you keep encountering the same types of conflicts, the same frustrating people, the same emotional triggers over and over again? What if I told you that the people you judge the most, the qualities you despise the most, are actually reflections of something buried deep within you? Jung called this the shadow self, the hidden part of your psyche that holds everything you suppress, everything you reject, everything you refuse to admit about yourself. And whether you realize it or not, this hidden part is shaping your entire life. You see, from the moment you were born, you were taught what is acceptable and what is not. Society, family, culture, all of them conditioned you to believe that certain traits are good while others are bad. You learned that being kind is rewarded while being aggressive is punished, that being humble is praised while being too confident is frowned upon. And so, without realizing it, you began to split yourself in two. You kept the traits that were socially acceptable, the ones that got you love, validation, and approval, and you buried the rest. But those buried parts didn't disappear. They didn't stop existing. They simply went into hiding, pushed down into the unconscious, where they continued to live, shaping your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions, without you even realizing it. And here's the part no one tells you: the shadow doesn't stay silent. It doesn't just sit there locked away in some forgotten corner of your mind. It projects, it reflects itself onto the world around you, meaning the very traits you reject in yourself, the emotions you suppress, the parts of yourself you don't want to acknowledge, you start seeing them in others. This is why you judge. This is why you get irrationally angry at certain people. This is why some behaviors trigger you so much more than others. It's not because those people are inherently bad. It's not because they are doing something objectively wrong. It's because, on some level, they are reflecting something about yourself that you don't want to see. Think about it. Have you ever met someone who constantly accuses others of being manipulative, but they themselves are incredibly manipulative? Have you ever noticed that the people who call others arrogant often have deep, unacknowledged arrogance within themselves? Have you ever seen someone criticize others for being selfish, while secretly struggling with their own selfish desires? That's projection. That's the shadow at work. And it's not just individuals. Entire societies, entire cultures, entire belief systems are built on mass projection. Political groups, religious movements, ideological battles, all of them are fueled by people projecting their own darkness onto someone else, blaming an external enemy for the very things they refuse to see in themselves. The moment you understand this, you start to see the world differently. You start to see yourself differently, because once you recognize projection for what it is, you can no longer ignore the fact that what you resist in others exists within you. But most people don't want to accept this, because it's uncomfortable, because it means taking responsibility. It means admitting that the anger, the resentment, the disgust you feel toward others isn't always about them, it's about you. And that is terrifying for most people, because it is so much easier to blame, to say, they are the problem, they are the reason I feel this way. But the truth is, the world is just a mirror, and what you see in others is just a reflection of what is already inside of you. Carl Jung believed that the only way to become a whole, authentic person was to confront this shadow, to integrate it, to stop running from it and instead bring it into the light. He understood that you cannot be truly free if you are constantly at war with yourself, constantly rejecting parts of who you are, constantly projecting your inner conflicts onto the outside world, because as long as you do that, you are not in control. Your shadow is. And this is why people keep repeating the same painful patterns in life. They don't realize that the unresolved parts of themselves are creating their reality, that the toxic relationships, the endless conflicts, the emotional triggers are all symptoms of a deeper problem, an unintegrated shadow that is screaming for attention. So how do you break free? How do you stop the cycle of projection and reclaim control over your own life? It starts with awareness, with looking inward instead of outward. The next time someone triggers you, the next time you feel intense judgment, irritation, or anger toward another person, pause. Ask yourself, what is this reaction really about? Is this emotion truly about them, or is it pointing to something unresolved within me? Because the shadow always reveals itself through emotional intensity. If someone's arrogance makes you furious, ask yourself, do I struggle with my own sense of self-worth? Have I suppressed my own confidence out of fear of appearing arrogant? If someone's selfishness enrages you, ask, have I been denying my own needs for so long that I resent those who freely express theirs? If dishonesty triggers you, ask, have I been dishonest with myself about something? Because the truth is, you cannot be triggered by something that does not already exist within you on some level. But here's the good news. The moment you stop fighting your shadow, the moment you stop projecting and start integrating, you take back your power. You become emotionally free. You stop being controlled by unconscious wounds. You stop repeating the same cycles, attracting the same situations, getting caught in the same conflicts. You start to understand yourself in a way you never have before. And in that understanding, you find peace. Because shadow integration isn't about becoming perfect. It's not about eliminating the parts of yourself you don't like. It's about accepting them. It's about realizing that you are a whole being, light and dark, strength and weakness, kindness and anger. It's about recognizing that the parts of yourself you have been running from are not your enemies. They are your teachers. They are the keys to your liberation. And once you accept them, once you embrace every part of yourself instead of rejecting it, something incredible happens. The world stops feeling so hostile. People stop triggering you so much. You stop taking things so personally. Because you are no longer projecting, you are no longer blaming, you are no longer seeing the world through the lens of your own denied emotions. You are seeing it clearly, and that is true freedom. Most people will never do this work. They will continue to blame, to judge, to remain trapped in their own projections, blind to the fact that they are the architects of their own suffering. But you don't have to. You can break the cycle. You can reclaim your power. You can stop living as a prisoner of your unconscious mind and start living as a fully aware, fully integrated human being. The only question is, are you ready to face your shadow? Most people will spend their entire lives avoiding their own shadow. They will distract themselves with work, with entertainment, with relationships that mirror their wounds instead of healing them. They will tell themselves that the problem is always out there, always someone else's fault, always caused by an external force. But the truth is, the battles they are fighting are not with the world. They are with themselves. And no matter how fast they run, no matter how deep they bury the uncomfortable parts of who they are, the shadow follows. It lingers beneath the surface, shaping their experiences, controlling their emotions, dictating their relationships, without them ever realizing it. But once you become aware of it, once you start seeing how projection plays out in your life, you can no longer pretend that the problem is outside of you. You start to notice it everywhere. You see how people who are deeply insecure lash out at others for being confident, how those who have suppressed their own anger judge anyone who dares to express theirs, how people who secretly crave control accuse others of being It's like watching a play where every character is unknowingly acting out their own unconscious fears, unaware that they are looking at distorted reflections of themselves. And when you start to recognize your own projections, it's humbling. Because suddenly you realize that every person you've ever judged, every trait you've ever despised in someone else, might be a signpost pointing back to something within you, maybe not in the exact same form, but in a way that you've refused to acknowledge. And that is where the real work begins. Carl Jung believed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. Think about that. Everything you blame on bad luck, on destiny, on circumstances beyond your control. What if it's not fate at all? What if it's just your own shadow, manifesting itself in your reality over and over again, trying to get your attention? Every failed relationship, every toxic friendship, every conflict you keep finding yourself in. What if none of it is random? What if it's all just your mind projecting your unhealed wounds onto the external world, hoping that one day you will wake up and finally see what's really going on? This is why patterns repeat. This is why some people always end up in relationships with the same type of partner, why they keep attracting the same kinds of people, why they find themselves dealing with the same issues no matter where they go. It's not because they're unlucky, it's because they are unconsciously recreating the very wounds they have refused to confront. And until they do, until they stop looking outside for the cause of their suffering and start looking within, the cycle will continue. So how do you break free? How do you stop being a prisoner of your own unconscious mind? It starts with radical honesty, the kind of honesty that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The next time you feel triggered, the next time someone makes you irrationally angry, instead of reacting, ask yourself, what is this really about? What part of me am I seeing in this person? What is this situation revealing about my own unhealed wound? It won't be easy. The mind is wired to protect the ego, to shield you from anything that challenges your self-position. It will resist. It will try to convince you that the problem is with them, not with you. But if you can push past that, if you can sit with the discomfort instead of running from it, you will start to see things with absolute clarity. You will begin to realize that the people who have hurt you were often just mirrors reflecting back something you needed to heal. That the situations you have struggled with were often just invitations to face the parts of yourself you have been rejecting. That the emotions you have been projecting onto others were really just pieces of you, waiting to be acknowledged. And when you reach this point, something shifts. The world stops feeling like a hostile place. You stop taking everything so personally. You stop feeling the need to control, to fix, to judge. Because you understand that nothing is happening to you, it's happening for you. Every challenge, every setback, every painful moment is an opportunity for integration, for healing, for becoming whole. This is the secret that so few people understand. That the real enemy is never outside of you. The real battle is never with other people. It is always within. And the moment you stop fighting it, the moment you embrace your shadow instead of projecting it, you become something that most people never will begin, something that most people never will free. Because true freedom isn't about escaping your darkness. It's about owning it. It's about looking at every part of yourself, the light, the dark, the things you love, the things you hate, and saying, this is me. Not just the version of yourself that the world approves of. Not just the traits that make you likable, acceptable, worthy of praise. But the whole thing, the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are. Because the irony is, the more you suppress, the more you project. The more you reject parts of yourself, the more you see them in others. But the moment you integrate, the moment you accept every aspect of yourself without shame, the need to project disappears. Judgment fades. Triggers lose their power. The world stops being a reflection of your inner wounds and starts becoming a reflection of your inner peace. This is the work, this is the path, and it is not for the faint of heart. It requires courage. It requires a willingness to face what most people spend their entire lives avoiding. It requires the ability to sit in discomfort, to feel the weight of your own suppressed emotions, to take responsibility for every reaction, every judgment, every moment of resistance. But if you do it, if you commit to this process, you will never be the same. You will no longer be a prisoner of unconscious patterns. You will no longer be controlled by your triggers. You will no longer live in a world shaped by projection. You will live in truth, and that is the most powerful thing of all. Most people will never reach this point. They will continue to blame, to judge, to repeat the same cycles, blind to the fact that the very thing they are resisting is the key to their liberation. But you have a choice. You can wake up. You can see the shadow for what it is, not an enemy, not something to be feared, but the missing piece of yourself that is waiting to be reclaimed. So what will you do? Will you keep running? Will you keep blaming? Will you keep projecting? Or will you turn inward and finally face what you've been avoiding? Because the moment you do, the moment you stop running and start integrating, the entire game changes. And for the first time in your life, you will see the world as it truly is, not a battlefield. Not a prison, not a collection of enemies and obstacles, but a mirror that has been waiting for you to look at it and say, I see you, I accept you, I am ready to be whole. The world is not happening to you, it is happening through you. Every person you meet, every conflict you face, every emotion that rises within you is not random, not meaningless, not separate from you. It is a reflection, a projection of something deeper, something unseen, something waiting to be acknowledged. But most people never see it. They go through life believing that their reactions are justified, that their judgments are objective, that their pain is always caused by something outside of them. They never stop to ask the most important question, the one that could change everything. What if this is about me? What if the reason that person triggers me so much is not because of what they are doing, but because of what it brings up in me? What if the things I judge in others are really just unacknowledged aspects of myself? What if the emotions I try to avoid, the patterns I can't escape, the relationships that feel like cycles are all coming from the same source, my own shadow? The truth is, they are. They always have been. But the mind resists this idea, because the moment you accept it, the moment you acknowledge that your experience of the world is shaped by what you have not yet faced within yourself, you can no longer blame. You can no longer point the finger at someone else. You can no longer hide from the fact that the battle is not with them, it is with you. And that is terrifying, because it means that the work you need to do is not out there. It is not about changing others, fixing the world, making people behave the way you think they should. It is about looking in the mirror and confronting what you have spent a lifetime avoiding. The anger, the jealousy, the insecurity, the fear, the arrogance, the need for validation, the parts of yourself that you were told were unacceptable, the parts that you buried, the parts that you swore you would never be, the parts that now show up in your life disguised as the things you hate in other people. Because that is what projection does. It takes what is hidden inside of you and places it onto the outside world so you can see it, so you can interact with it, so you can finally acknowledge its existence. But instead of recognizing it as a mirror, most people react. They get angry, they judge, they try to separate themselves from it. They say, I am nothing like that, when in reality they are rejecting a piece of themselves that they refuse to claim. And the more they reject it, the stronger it becomes. The more it controls them, the more it shapes their reality in ways they do not understand. Because the shadow does not go away just because you refuse to look at it. It only grows, it finds new ways to reveal itself. It seeps into your words, your choices, your relationships, your fears, until one day you realize that you have been running from yourself all along. And when that moment comes, you have two choices. You can keep running. You can keep telling yourself that the problem is always out there, that your pain is always caused by someone else, that you are just unlucky, just misunderstood, just a victim of circumstance. Or you can stop. You can turn inward. You can face what you have buried. You can take responsibility for the fact that everything you project onto the world is coming from within you. That is the hardest thing you will ever do, but it is also the most liberating. Because once you see it, once you understand that the things you fight against are actually just reflections of yourself, you stop fighting, you stop resisting, you stop trying to fix the world outside of you and start healing the world within you, and that changes everything. Because when you integrate your shadow, when you embrace the parts of yourself you once rejected, the world no longer feels like a threat. The people who used to trigger you no longer have power over you. The patterns that once controlled your life begin to dissolve. You become lighter, freer, more whole, not because you have eliminated the darkness, but because you have finally made peace with it. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said that the shadow must be integrated, not destroyed, because the shadow is not your enemy. It is not something to be fought or feared. It is simply the part of you that has been waiting to be seen, waiting to be accepted, waiting to be brought back into the light. And once you do that, you step into a new level of existence. You no longer react to life, you create it. You no longer attract the same painful experiences, you transform them. You no longer judge others for their flaws, you understand them, because you have faced your own. And this is what most people will never understand. They will continue to live in projection, blaming others for what they refuse to see in themselves. They will continue to fight against their own reflection, mistaking it for an enemy. They will continue to repeat the same cycles, experience the same pain, struggle with the same emotions, never realizing that the key to their freedom has been inside them all along. But you are not most people. Because if you were, you would not be here. You would not be questioning. You would not be searching. You would not feel that pull deep inside of you, the pull that tells you there is something more, something beyond what you have been taught, something waiting to be remembered. And now you have a choice. You can continue living as you always have, blaming, projecting, judging, unconsciously recreating the same struggles over and over again. Or you can break the cycle. You can turn inward. You can stop running from yourself and finally face the parts of you that have been controlling your life from the shadows. Because the moment you do that, the moment you step into the truth of who you are, all of who you are, you reclaim your power. You stop being a puppet of your unconscious mind and start becoming the creator of your reality. You become whole, and that is the greatest transformation of all. So the only question left is, are you ready? Are you ready to face what you have been running from? Are you ready to stop fighting the world and start integrating yourself? Are you ready to step into the truth that has been waiting for you all along? Because once you do, there is no going back. Once you see the shadow for what it really is, once you stop projecting and start accepting, once you realize that every judgment, every trigger, every reaction has always been a message leading you back to yourself, you will never look at the world the same way again. You will never look at yourself the same way again, because you will finally understand the world is not your enemy, other people are not your problem, the only thing that has ever been in your way is you. And the moment you accept that, the moment you take responsibility for everything you have projected onto the world, you become something that most people never will. The moment you stop projecting, the moment you take responsibility for your own shadow, you begin to realize something extraordinary. Life was never working against you. The universe was never punishing you. The conflicts, the triggers, the people who pushed your buttons, they were never obstacles. They were teachers. They were mirrors. They were reflections of the parts of yourself you were unwilling to see. And when you finally stop resisting, when you finally turn inward instead of outward, you begin to understand the deeper truth. The world is not happening to you. It is responding to you. Everything you experience, every relationship, every situation, every struggle is a response to your own internal state. The more you suppress, the more life pushes those suppressed parts in front of you. The more you deny, the louder the world echoes back the very thing you refuse to acknowledge. It is not punishment. It is not coincidence. It is the natural law of projection. What is hidden within you must eventually be revealed to you. But most people never get to this point. They spend their entire lives trapped in a cycle of blame and reaction, never realizing that what they fight against is not separate from them. It is them. They tell themselves stories about why life is unfair, why people are cruel, why they are always the victim, but they never stop to ask if they are the common denominator in all of their struggles. They never stop to wonder why the same lessons keep repeating, why the same emotions keep surfacing, why the same patterns keep playing out in different forms. And that is the great illusion. That is the trick of the unconscious mind. It convinces you that the problem is always external, that the enemy is always out there. But the moment you look inward, the moment you take responsibility, the illusion shatters. You see reality for what it truly is. Not a battleground, not a punishment, but a mirror. And this is where true freedom begins, because when you stop projecting, you stop being controlled by your unconscious mind. You stop being ruled by triggers you don't understand. You stop feeling powerless because you finally see that you were never powerless to begin with. The only power the world had over you was the power you unknowingly gave it by refusing to face yourself. Carl Jung knew this. He understood that the real work of transformation was not about eliminating the darkness. It was about integrating it. The goal is not to destroy the shadow, but to own it. To recognize that every trait you once rejected, every impulse, every insecurity, every emotion you tried to bury is a part of you. And only by embracing all of who you are can you become whole. But that is where most people resist. They don't want to acknowledge their anger, their selfishness, their arrogance, their jealousy. They want to believe they are better than that. They want to maintain the illusion of purity, of goodness, of superiority. But the harder they try to maintain that image, the more their shadow grows in the darkness, manifesting in ways they can't control, spilling out through projection, through conflict, through judgment. And this is why self-righteousness is one of the clearest signs of an unintegrated shadow. The louder someone condemns, the more intensely they judge, the more aggressively they point fingers, the clearer it becomes that they are running from something inside of themselves. The person who constantly calls others liars is often lying to themselves. The person who shames others for their weaknesses is often hiding their own. The person who accuses others of selfishness often resents their own suppressed desires. Because that is how the shadow works. It hides in plain sight, disguised as moral superiority, as righteous anger, as the belief that you are different from the very things you condemn. But you are not different. You are human, and like every human you carry within you both light and darkness. The question is, will you own it, or will you continue to reject it and let it control you from the shadows? Because the paradox of shadow work is that the more you accept your darkness, the less power it has over you. When you own your anger, you no longer have to project it onto others. When you acknowledge your jealousy, you no longer have to resent those who have what you want. When you recognize your own selfishness, you stop attracting selfishness in others. The moment you stop denying, the moment you stop running, the shadow no longer needs to manifest externally. And that is the real secret. The work is not about fixing the world. It is not about changing other people. It is about mastering yourself. Because when you do that, when you take full responsibility for every part of who you are, life begins to transform in ways you never imagined. The conflicts dissolve, the repeated patterns end. The people who once triggered you no longer have any effect on you, not because they changed, but because you did. You see, the world does not need to change for you to find peace. Your circumstances do not need to change. The people around you do not need to change. The only thing that needs to change is your awareness, your willingness to see the truth, to stop looking outward and start looking inward, to stop fighting your reflection and start embracing it. Because the moment you do that, you step into a level of clarity that few people will ever experience. You see through the illusion. You stop reacting. You stop blaming. You stop being a victim of your own unconscious mind. And in that moment, for the first time, you are free. Most people will never reach this level of self-awareness. They will spend their entire lives trapped in the projection cycle, believing that their suffering is caused by something outside of them, never realizing that they are the source of it all. They will continue to fight the world, to judge, to blame, to repeat the same mistakes, to recreate the same struggles, never stopping to ask why. But you don't have to be one of them. Because now you know the truth. The world is not against you. Life is not unfair. People are not the problem. The only thing that has ever been standing in your way is your own shadow. And the only way to break free is to stop running from it, to face it, to own it. And the moment you do, you become unstoppable. You become someone who cannot be manipulated, who cannot be triggered, who cannot be controlled by unconscious fears and old wounds. You become someone who moves through life with clarity, with purpose, with power. Because when you are no longer fighting yourself, when you have made peace with every part of who you are, you step into the highest version of yourself. The version that is no longer reacting but creating, no longer suffering but thriving, no longer trapped in the illusions of the mind but fully awake. And that is what this journey is all about. Not becoming perfect, not eliminating the shadow, but owning it, integrating it, and finally stepping into the truth of who you really are. So the question is, will you do it? Will you take responsibility? Will you face the parts of yourself that you've spent your entire life avoiding? Will you stop running from the mirror and finally see yourself as you truly are? Because the moment you do, everything changes. The world doesn't look the same. People don't affect you the same. Life stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like something you are actively shaping, moment by moment. And when that happens, you are no longer just living, you are awake. Most people go their entire lives asleep, trapped in the illusion that the world is happening to them. They never stop to question the patterns, the repeated struggles, the way certain people trigger them over and over again. They think it's random. They think it's just how life is. They never realize that every conflict, every frustration, every judgment is an opportunity, a doorway leading them back to themselves. But instead of walking through it, instead of looking inward, they point fingers, they blame, they fight against the mirror instead of realizing it's there to show them what they refuse to see. But once you wake up, you can't unsee it. The game changes. You stop seeing enemies and start seeing reflections. You stop getting lost in emotions that aren't fully yours. You stop reacting to life as if it is something separate from you, and you start recognizing that it is responding to you. And when that happens, when you finally accept that what you've been running from has always been a part of you, you step into a level of power that most people will never touch. Because you're no longer a victim of your own unconscious mind. You're no longer controlled by your projections. You're no longer repeating the same cycles, walking the same paths, running into the same brick walls over and over again. You see the pattern for what it is, and in that moment you can choose. You can either continue feeding the cycle, continue living in reaction, continue blaming the outside world for what is really an internal war, or you can stop. You can turn inward. You can break the pattern. And the moment you do, you shift. You become something different. The same situations no longer affect you the same way. The people who used to trigger you lose their power over you. You see through the illusion. And when you see through it, you are no longer bound by it. Because the truth is, most of the struggles in your life were never about what you thought they were about. They weren't about the people who hurt you. They weren't about the circumstances that seemed unfair. They weren't about luck or fate or being in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were about you. They were about what you had not yet healed, what you had not yet accepted, what you had been projecting onto the world without realizing it. And the moment you own that, the moment you take full responsibility for every thought, every emotion, every reaction, you stop leaking your power into the world around you. You reclaim it, and when you reclaim it, reality itself begins to bend. Because the thing they never told you is that reality is not fixed. It is not absolute. It is shaped by your perception, by your beliefs, by your unconscious programming. And as long as your shadow is in control, as long as you are still projecting, still blaming, still resisting the truth, you are living inside a reality that is being dictated by the parts of yourself you refuse to face. But the moment you integrate, the moment you bring the shadow into the light, everything changes. Life starts flowing in ways it never did before. The struggles that once seemed impossible start dissolving. The relationships that once felt like battles start to shift. You no longer attract the same problems, because the part of you that was creating them has been healed. And this is why most people never truly break free, because they want the world to change, but they don't want to change themselves. They want life to be easier, but they don't want to do the work. They want to stop suffering, but they don't want to look at the ways they are creating their own suffering. But you cannot escape a prison you refuse to see. You cannot break free from a cycle you are still feeding. You cannot master your reality until you master yourself. And that is why shadow work is so powerful, because it is not about fixing the world. It is not about changing other people. It is about removing the illusions within yourself, so that the world no longer has power over you. It is about understanding that nothing outside of you has ever truly controlled you. Only your perception of it has. And once you grasp that, once you fully understand that reality is nothing more than a mirror reflecting back your own internal world, you begin to see just how much of your life has been dictated by what you refuse to see. So, what will you do? Will you continue running from yourself, pretending that your problems are outside of you? Will you keep blaming, keep judging, keep repeating the same patterns, hoping that somehow, this time, things will be different? Or will you step into the truth? Will you take the harder path, the one that requires you to be brutally honest with yourself, the one that forces you to look at the things you don't want to see, the one that demands you own every part of yourself, the light and the dark, the strength and the weakness, the beauty and the shame? Because that is the only way out, not by changing the world, not by fixing other people, but by stepping fully into the truth of who you are, by integrating rather than projecting, by taking responsibility rather than blaming, by mastering yourself rather than trying to control something outside of you. And when you do that, when you fully accept every part of yourself, something incredible happens. The world stops fighting you, the resistance disappears, the chaos settles. And you realize that it was never the world that was against you, it was never other people, it was never fate or destiny or bad luck. It was always you. And that realization is not a burden, it is freedom. Because if you created it, that means you can change it. If you shaped this reality through your unconscious mind, that means you can shape a new one through awareness. If the world has been mirroring your wounds, then the moment you healed, the reflection changes. This is why the greatest power you will ever have is not in controlling others, it is not in changing the world, it is in knowing yourself so deeply, so completely, that nothing outside of you can shake you, because when you are whole, the world cannot break you. When you are integrated, you are untouchable, and that is what they don't want you to know. Because the world is designed to keep you projecting, to keep you asleep, to keep you looking outward instead of inward, to make you believe that your pain is someone else's fault, that your struggles are beyond your control, that your happiness is dependent on something outside of you. But now, you know the truth. And once you know, you cannot go back. You can either live in illusion, pretending that the world is against you, pretending that your pain is not your own, pretending that you have no control, or you can wake up. You can own your shadow. You can integrate every part of yourself. You can take back every ounce of energy you have projected onto the world and finally step into your full power. And when you do, the world will no longer feel like something you have to fight against. It will feel like something that is flowing with you, because for the first time in your life, it actually will be. Once you wake up to the reality of projection, the world stops being a place of random events and starts revealing itself as a carefully designed reflection. The struggles that once felt unfair, the conflicts that once felt exhausting, the people who once triggered you, they all begin to make sense, because now you understand that none of it was ever random. Every challenge, every frustration, every repeated pattern was life trying to show you something about yourself. And now that you see it, you cannot go back to the way things were. This is where true transformation begins, not in trying to change the world, not in controlling the people around you, but in fully owning everything that has shaped your experience. The light and the darkness, the things you're proud of, and the things you wish weren't a part of you, the desires you've denied, the fears you've ignored, the traits you've projected onto others instead of acknowledging in yourself. Because until you do, you will always be at the mercy of forces you don't understand. You will always be controlled by unconscious patterns, repeating the same lessons, running into the same walls, mistaking your own reflection for an enemy. But once you integrate, once you take full responsibility, something incredible happens. The weight you've been carrying, the resentment, the frustration, the emotional reactions that used to consume you, starts to disappear. The world no longer feels like something you have to defend yourself against. People's opinions lose their power over you. The things that used to trigger you no longer affect you the same way, not because the world has changed, but because you have changed. And that is the secret. The only thing you were ever fighting against was yourself. The only thing that ever needed to change was your awareness. The moment you stop projecting, the moment you stop blaming, the moment you stop running from your own reflection, you become something most people will never experience: free. Because freedom is not about escaping the world, it is not about avoiding difficult emotions, it is not about eliminating challenges. Freedom is the ability to walk through all of it, every experience, every conflict, every unexpected moment, without losing yourself in reaction, without being controlled by old wounds, without falling into unconscious patterns. Freedom is knowing that no matter what happens, You are in control of you. And that changes everything. Because when you are no longer controlled by your own projections, you begin to create from a different place. You begin to see opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You begin to attract experiences that align with your highest self, instead of ones that mirror your unresolved pain. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself, to defend yourself, to fight for validation, because you no longer need the world to be a certain way in order to feel whole. This is why some people seem to move through life effortlessly, while others are always struggling. It is not because life is unfair. It is because one group is awake and the other is asleep. One group is aware of their patterns, their shadows, their projections, and they work with them consciously. The other remains trapped in reaction, blaming external forces for what is actually coming from within. And the world will always reward awareness. The more conscious you become, the more aligned your life becomes. The more responsibility you take for your emotions, your thoughts, your energy, the less resistance you face. Things flow. Not because there are no challenges, but because you no longer perceive them as something happening to you. You see them for what they are. Opportunities to integrate, to evolve, to step even further into your power. But most people won't do this work. They will stay in their stories, stay in their judgments, stay in their belief that they are right and the world is wrong. They will continue to blame, continue to repeat, continue to live inside the illusion that life is something that is outside of their control. And because they refuse to take responsibility, they will stay stuck. They will continue attracting the same struggles. But that does not have to be you. You have a choice, right now. You can either keep playing the game the way you always have, reacting, projecting, living in unconscious patterns, or you can step into something higher. You can begin to observe yourself, your triggers, your judgments, your emotional responses, and ask, where is this coming from? What part of me is being revealed right now? Because when you do that, you stop being a puppet of your own unconscious mind. You stop being pulled in every direction by emotions you don't understand. You step into mastery, you step into power. And that is where everything shifts. Because the moment you take full responsibility for your reality, you gain the ability to reshape it. The moment you stop blaming others, you regain control over your own energy. The moment you integrate the parts of yourself you once rejected, you stop attracting the same painful experiences. The world stops being a battleground and starts being a canvas. A canvas that you are painting, moment by moment, with your thoughts, your perceptions, your awareness. And when you truly understand this, when you stop looking outside of yourself for answers and start looking within, you will experience something that most people never will. Peace. Not because life is perfect, not because challenges no longer exist, but because you are no longer ruled by them. You move through the world differently. You see people differently. You understand that those who judge, those who blame, those who lash out are simply lost in their own projections, trapped in their own unconscious shadows. And instead of reacting, instead of being pulled into their illusions, you hold your center. You see them for what they are, mirrors of their own unhealed pain. And in that understanding, you are free. This is what it means to truly wake up. To step outside the illusion of projection and step into reality as it actually is. To see things clearly, without distortion. To take full responsibility for your experience, knowing that the world is not separate from you, it is reflecting you. So now the question is, what will you do with this awareness? Will you continue to play the game unconsciously, reacting, blaming, repeating? Or will you choose something different? Will you choose to observe, to integrate, to take full ownership of your reality? Because that choice is always yours. And the moment you choose responsibility over blame, awareness over reaction, truth over illusion, you step into something rare. You step into real power. Not the kind that controls others, not the kind that dominates or forces its will upon the world, the kind that controls itself, the kind that is unshakable, the kind that is free. Because that is what true freedom has always been. Not an escape from the world, but an escape from your own unconscious mind. And once you experience that, Once you truly integrate your shadow and step into wholeness, you will never see reality the same way again, because you will finally understand. It was never them, it was always you, and that is the most powerful realization of all. Most people will never see this. They will spend their lives looking outward, blaming circumstances, blaming others, blaming the past, never realizing that the only thing they were ever fighting was themselves. They will walk through life unconscious of the fact that every experience, every struggle, every person they judge is just a mirror, reflecting back what is unresolved within them. And so they will continue the cycle. They will keep repeating the same mistakes, keep attracting the same conflicts, keep feeling the same emotions, convinced that the world is unfair, that people are cruel, that life is something that happens to them rather than something that is responding to them. But now you know the truth. Now you see what was always there, hidden beneath the surface. The world is not separate from you. It is an extension of you, a perfect reflection of your inner world, your thoughts, your beliefs, your deepest unconscious patterns. And once you understand this, you realize something that changes everything. If you want to change your life, you don't start with the outside world. You start with yourself. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. Because that is exactly what happens. When you are unaware of your own shadow, when you are blind to your own projections, life will seem random, chaotic, out of your control. You will experience suffering without understanding why. You will find yourself in the same situations, the same arguments, the same patterns, thinking that it's just bad luck, or bad timing, or bad people. But none of it is random, none of it is a coincidence. It is your shadow, manifesting over and over again, giving you endless chances to wake up. And that is the beauty of it. Life will always show you what you need to see. It will never stop reflecting back your unconscious mind. If you are willing to look, if you are willing to be honest with yourself, every trigger, every frustration, every judgment can become a doorway to deeper understanding. The world is your teacher, and every experience is a lesson, if you are willing to see it. But that is where most people stop, because it is easier to look away. It is easier to blame than it is to take responsibility. It is easier to say, they are wrong, than it is to say, what is this revealing about me? But those who are truly ready to wake up, those who are ready to break the cycle, they will ask the harder question. They will sit with the discomfort. They will look at their reactions, their triggers, their judgments, and instead of running from them, they will explore them. And when they do, something incredible happens. The world no longer feels like something they have to fight against. The resistance they have felt for so long begins to dissolve. The people who once triggered them stop holding power over them, because they realize that it was never about those people in the first place. It was never about the external world. It was always about what was unhealed within them. Imagine what that would feel like, to walk through life without being triggered, without being controlled by unconscious wounds, without feeling the need to prove yourself, to defend yourself, to fight against the world. Imagine what it would feel like to move through your days with absolute clarity, knowing that no matter what happens, you are in control of your reactions, your emotions, your energy. That is the power of integration. That is what happens when you stop projecting and start owning every part of yourself. The world stops being a battlefield. It stops being something that feels against you, and instead it becomes a space where you are free to create, free to evolve, free to step fully into your highest self. Because that is the real secret, the thing that no one tells you. The world is not here to break you, it is here to wake you up. Every hardship, every trigger, every painful experience was never meant to punish you, it was meant to show you what you have not yet healed. And the moment you stop seeing those moments as attacks and start seeing them as lessons, you take back your power. But you must be willing to do the work. You must be willing to go where most people will never go. You must be willing to sit with the discomfort of seeing yourself fully, of facing the parts of you that you have denied, the emotions you have suppressed, the truth you have been avoiding, because once you do, the game changes. You will no longer live in reaction. You will no longer be controlled by unconscious patterns. You will no longer be caught in the endless loop of projection and blame. Instead, you will be free. Free to see people as they are, rather than as reflections of your own wounds. Free to experience life without needing to control it, without needing to prove anything to anyone. Free to create from a place of clarity rather than a place of fear. Free to exist in your full, integrated power. But that kind of freedom is rare, because most people are not willing to go this deep. They are not willing to look in the mirror and take full responsibility for what they see. They would rather stay in the illusion, in the safety of blaming the world for their suffering. But you are not most people, because if you were, you would not be here. Something inside of you already knows this truth. Something inside of you has been pulling you toward this moment, toward this understanding. And now that you see it, the choice is yours. You can either continue as you always have, projecting, blaming, repeating, or you can wake up. You can start paying attention to the signs, the patterns, the moments when life is trying to show you something. You can start taking responsibility for every reaction, every trigger, every emotion that rises within you. You can stop looking outward for the answer and start looking within. Because once you do, you will never see life the same way again. You will no longer see problems, you will see lessons. You will no longer see enemies, you will see teachers. You will no longer see suffering, you will see opportunities to heal. And in that shift, you will find something that most people spend their entire lives searching for. Peace. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. Not because life is suddenly perfect, but because you are no longer controlled by the illusions that once dictated your every move. Not because challenges no longer exist, but because you no longer see them as obstacles, you see them as part of the journey. And that is the ultimate transformation. To no longer be ruled by the unconscious mind, to no longer be a prisoner of projection, to no longer live as a reaction to the past but as a conscious creator of the present. That is what it means to integrate the shadow. That is what it means to truly wake up. And once you do, you will never go back. Because once you see the truth, you can no longer unsee it. The only question is, what will you do with it? Because the world is waiting. And it is not waiting for you to change it. It is waiting for you to change yourself. Once you wake up to this truth, life stops feeling like something you need to escape from. It stops feeling like a battle. It stops feeling like something outside of your control. Because now you see it for what it really is. A mirror. A perfect reflection of your inner world, showing you exactly where you are, what you need to heal, what you need to integrate. And instead of running from it, instead of blaming, instead of projecting, you meet it with awareness. You meet it with understanding. You meet it with the knowing that everything you experience is guiding you toward wholeness. This is the work that most people will never do, not because they can't, but because they won't, because it is easier to stay asleep. It is easier to point the finger outward, to say it's their fault, it's the world's fault, it's fate, or bad luck, or something outside of me that I cannot control. But the moment you take responsibility, the moment you say, this is mine, this is coming from me, this is something I have the power to change, you reclaim every ounce of energy that you once wasted on blame, you pull back every piece of yourself that you once scattered across the world in projection, and for the first time, you become whole. Because that is what this is really about. Integration. No longer rejecting parts of yourself. No longer denying emotions, thoughts, aspects of who you are. No longer pretending that you are only light while running from your own darkness, but instead facing it, owning it, realizing that nothing inside of you is wrong, nothing inside of you is a mistake, that every single part of you, yes, even the anger, even the fear, even the things you once hated about yourself, deserves to be seen, accepted, and brought back into the light. And when you do this, the things that once controlled you no longer have power over you. The triggers that once consumed you begin to dissolve. The people who once irritated you, the patterns that once repeated, the situations that once felt like they were against you, all lose their grip on you. Not because they changed, but because you did. Because the moment you integrate, the moment you stop projecting, the external world adjusts, the energy shifts, the game changes. Most people spend their entire lives trying to fix what's outside of them. They try to change other people, they try to control situations, they try to force life to conform to their expectations, not realizing that the only thing they ever needed to change was themselves, because when you change, the world cannot help but reflect that change. This is why true power is not found in control. It is not found in forcing, in manipulating, in trying to bend reality to your will. True power is found in awareness, in knowing that reality is always responding to you, that the world is showing you exactly where you are in your own growth, in your own evolution, that the moment you shift internally, the external will follow. And when you understand this, life becomes something completely different. It stops feeling random. It stops feeling like something you need to fight against. You stop getting lost in frustration, in resistance, in the belief that things should be different than they are. Instead, you start asking, what is this showing me? What is this teaching me? What in me is being reflected right now? And in that shift, you stop living in reaction and start living in creation. Because that is the secret. You are not here to fight the world. You are not here to fix the world. You are here to understand yourself so deeply that the world around you transforms effortlessly. Not because you forced it to, but because your energy, your awareness, your presence itself became something different. This is why the most powerful people, the ones who move through life with ease, with clarity, with unshakable confidence, are not the ones who try to dominate the world. They are the ones who have mastered themselves. They are the ones who have integrated every part of who they are, who have nothing left to prove, nothing left to fight against, nothing left to project onto others. Because they understand that the only enemy they ever had was the one in their own mind, and once that enemy is gone, there is no more struggle. This is the level of awareness most people will never reach. Not because they can't, but because they are too attached to their own suffering. They are too comfortable with their own illusions. They would rather be right than be free. They would rather hold on to their judgments than open themselves to a new way of seeing. They would rather blame the world than take responsibility for the fact that the world was never against them. It was simply responding to their own unconsciousness. But you do not have to live that way. You do not have to stay trapped in those illusions. You do not have to spend your life reacting to things you don't understand, fighting battles that were never meant to be fought, repeating cycles that were only meant to wake you up. You can choose something different. Right now, you can choose to stop seeing the world as separate from you. You can choose to stop running from your own reflection. You can choose to integrate, to accept, to step into full responsibility for your reality. And when you do, you will understand something that most people never will. You are never broken. You are never incomplete. You never needed to be anything other than what you already are. The only thing that was ever missing was your awareness of that truth. And once you see it, truly see it, you will never again live in fear. You will never again waste your energy on things that do not serve you. You will never again look at the world as something that is happening to you, but rather something that is happening through you, for you, because of you. Because now you understand. The world is not something you need to escape. It is not something you need to fix. It is something you are creating, moment by moment, thought by thought, projection by projection. And now that you see it, now that you know, the only question left is, what will you do with this knowledge? Because the choice is yours. It always has been. Most people will stay asleep. Most people will continue playing the same game, repeating the same patterns, living in the same illusions, but you do not have to. You can wake up. You can take responsibility for every part of yourself. You can integrate everything that was once hidden in the shadows, and in doing so, you can step into a level of clarity, of power, of freedom that few will ever experience. And once you do, the world will no longer feel like something you need to fight against. It will feel like something that has been waiting for you to see it clearly, because the moment you do, it is no longer happening to you. It is responding to you. It always has been. The only difference now is that you finally see it. And in that awareness, you are free. Once you see it, once you understand that the world has never been outside of you, that it has only ever been reflecting you, something inside of you shifts forever. You are no longer a passive observer of your own life. You are no longer a victim of circumstance, no longer waiting for something to change before you feel free, before you feel at peace, before you feel whole. Because now you know. Nothing was ever missing. Nothing was ever broken. The only thing that needed to change was your perception, your awareness, your willingness to see reality for what it has always been. And that is why most people will never reach this level of understanding, because it requires a kind of courage that is rare. The courage to look at yourself fully, the courage to take responsibility for every experience, every relationship, every challenge that has ever appeared in your life, the courage to stop blaming, to stop projecting, to stop running from the things that have been trying to teach you. But if you do this, if you commit to this path, you will become something most people never will. Free. Not because the world outside of you has changed, but because you have. Because you no longer see struggle where you once did. You no longer see enemies where you once did. You no longer see obstacles where you once did. You see mirrors. You see lessons. You see opportunities to grow, to evolve, to step even further into the person you were always meant to be. And that is the real gift of shadow work. It is not about eliminating the parts of yourself that you once rejected. It is about integrating them. It is about becoming whole again. Because when you do that, when you stop dividing yourself into light and dark, good and bad, acceptable and unacceptable, you stop living a fragmented life. You stop feeling like you have to hide parts of yourself. You stop fearing your own reflection. And in that wholeness, you find something you have been searching for all along. Peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from avoiding problems, from running from emotions, from numbing yourself to reality. But the kind of peace that comes from knowing that nothing in this world has power over you unless you give it power. The kind of peace that comes from no longer being controlled by unconscious patterns, by old wounds, by fears you never took the time to face. The kind of peace that comes from knowing that you are in control, not of everything that happens, not of other people, not of the external world, but of yourself, your reactions, your energy, your perception. And when you reach that point, when you integrate your shadow and take full responsibility for your reality, something incredible happens. The struggles that once consumed you begin to fade. The patterns that once repeated begin to dissolve. The people who once triggered you no longer have that power. Because you are no longer attracting lessons you have already learned. You are no longer recreating pain that has already been healed. You are no longer lost in the cycle of projection. You are free. And freedom, real freedom, is not about escaping reality. It is about seeing it clearly. It is about walking through life with the understanding that every experience is here to serve you, that every challenge is an invitation to grow, that every moment is an opportunity to step further into your own power. And the people who understand this, the ones who have done the work, they move differently. There is something unshakable about them. They do not react the way others do. They do not blame the way others do. They do not fear the way others do, because they know something that most people don't. The world is not happening to you, it is responding to you. And once you see that, once you feel it, once you live from that truth, you will never be the same again. You will no longer look for external validation because you have already validated yourself. You will no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone because you have already accepted every part of who you are. You will no longer be at war with the world because you are no longer at war with yourself. And this is what true self-mastery looks like, not perfection, not the absence of challenges, but the ability to move through life without being controlled by what is unconscious. The ability to see yourself fully and still choose love. The ability to stand in your power without needing to take power from others. The ability to look at every situation, every person, every emotion and say, this is mine and I own it. And when you do, when you reach this level of awareness, the world will feel different, not because it has changed, but because you have. You will move through life with a kind of clarity, a kind of confidence, a kind of peace that cannot be faked, that cannot be taken away, that cannot be shaken by anything outside of you. And that is the secret, the thing they don't tell you, the thing most people will never understand. You were never meant to be at war with yourself. You were never meant to live in reaction. You were never meant to feel disconnected from your own power. You were meant to be whole. You were meant to integrate. You were meant to wake up, to see clearly, to take full ownership of your life, and to create from that place. And now that you know, now that you see, the only question left is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you go back to sleep, back to the illusion of separation, back to the comfort of projection and blame? Or will you step forward into something greater? Will you take responsibility for your own energy, your own reality, your own life? Because that choice is yours. It always has been. And the moment you decide, the moment you fully commit to this path, the world will shift. Not because it has to, but because you have. And in that shift, you will realize something that will stay with you forever. You were never powerless. You were never small. You were never at the mercy of anything outside of you. You were always the creator. The only thing that was ever missing was your awareness of that truth. And now you are awake.